A number of controversial marches are taking place across the city and country this week, and they'll be conducted under the watchful eye of police and counter-protesters. Here's a live shot from Chopper 24 of some of the, it looks like it's the counter-protesters making their way to Queen's Park this hour.
And Queen's Park is where we find TV24's Steve Ryan live with more there. Looks like a really huge turnout for the counter-protest. Steve, the initial protest, though, set to start at Queen's Park. What's it like there now?
It's non-existent at the moment, Nick, and I say that because we just came from the south side of Queen's Park, where we were expecting the protesters to gather, and there are none. I did speak with a man off camera a short time ago who claimed to be one of the organizers, and he was in fact looking for his group that he said was going to gather here on the north lawn of Queen's Park, but I haven't seen him as of yet. That's not to say they're not coming, of course, but I just haven't seen them. But there certainly are hundreds upon hundreds of counter-protesters that have made their way from Barbara Hall Park along Wellesley, north side of Queen's Park here, and they, I believe, are going to gather on the front lawn. Now, these are people that are advocates of the LGBTQ community and supporters of gender ideology and sexual orientation. The protesters are gathering around the country to protest teachings out in the public schools in British Columbia that are teaching gender ideology and sexual orientation. I spoke with Reverend Sherry DeNovo. She was a former MPP with the New Democratic Party here at Queen's Park. I talked with her just a short time ago, and you'll hear from her in a clip in 1 minute. But she was saying that this is not about teaching gender ideology and sexual orientation. She said this is more about acceptance and creating safe spaces for children. Here's more from Sherry DeNovo. Let's listen.
We are here defending our human rights codes across Canada, and most importantly, our vulnerable children. We know that trans and gender fluid children who are exploring their sexuality are the ones most at risk of suicide, and hate-filled demonstrations who are targeting them. This will result in attempted suicide. We know this. So we're, as parents, as people who have fought for these laws, as I have for many decades, to change our human rights codes to include trans folk, and that's Canada-wide, by the way, so this is the law.
Programs are laid out by this government under his law.
We're just listening to Kristen Wong-Tam right now. She's live here.
Taking place at school. That is categorically false. There is no such thing as gender ideology. Gender dysphoria is not contagious, but you have a lot of parents, families, friends, allies, and the students themselves that are now scared, and they have been targeted by a group of individuals who have extreme views who really don't support them. So there are a number of reasons why we have to stand up for them. And we should continue to do that. That's the right of the child. These are their charter rights. They have the right to have gender expression, gender identity under the charter.
Do you think Premier Ford should apologize for saying that?
Premier Ford should apologize, but he should also understand that he has a responsibility as an elected official to call for calm, to lead us in this conversation, to work with education professionals as well as their parents and the students who are most directly impacted on what that solution looks like. Okay, thank you very much.
Chris, can you talk with me? We'll walk and talk. Sure, we're live on CP24. I missed most of what you were talking about. What's going on here today?
Today we have obviously people from our community and abroad who are descending upon Queen's Park. I'm marching with a group of advocates, including parents and friends of lesbians and gays. I'm marching with students who are directly impacted by the anti-2S LGBT, anti-trans rhetoric. We are hearing from students and their families that they are scared to go to school. There is so much misinformation that is directing hate at them and is creating a climate of violence. We already know that 2S LGBT students are more susceptible to violence, more susceptible to bullying, and they already suffer mental illness because of that unsafe environment. So we have to stand up for them because we know that suicide rates amongst the queer students and trans students are significantly higher, and if they're not being supported at home, then school is sometimes the only safe place for them, and that's why we're here.
The protesters that are here are talking about the concerns for the curriculum being taught out on the West Coast with sexual orientation and gender ideology. I was talking with Reverend Sherry DeNovo just a short time ago, and she said this is not about that. It's about creating safe spaces for all children, especially those who are maybe questioning or coming into their own sexual identity. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I counter the fact that gender ideology is not a thing. Students are not being indoctrinated at school. Publicly funded education should mean high quality education where students are provided with accurate, truthful information about the way the world is. And that includes investments in math, science, English, as well as, of course, every other subject matter. So I categorically refute the fact that there is this thing called gender ideology or indoctrination. What we do have right now is a climate at school which is becoming increasingly hostile and unsafe and violent for trans, non-binary students, as well as their parents and their families and caregivers. They are scared to go to school because of this constant rise of anti-2S LGBT rhetoric that is targeting them and their families.
Okay, Steve Ryan, we're going to have to leave it there as we move on and we'll continue to cover the protest and counter-protest throughout the day here on CP24.